Chapter 20.
Meaning and Self-Expression. Quote, I didn't have a childhood, and maybe that's why there are times I worry I won't have a life. But other times I can think, no way, that's not going to happen. End quote. Juliet. Quote, there is only one thing that I dread, not to be worthy of my sufferings. End quote. Fyodor Dostoevsky. Some models of therapy or personal development do not give much attention to the question of meaning. Our view is that meaning and the related issue of self-expression is of great importance in overcoming the effects of childhood trauma. We do not see this discussion as a diversion or philosophical indulgence. However, we wish to acknowledge that our discussion of meaning does not represent facts or the product of scientific research. There are no techniques or strategies here, but there are ideas you may be able to identify with, the voices of others who experienced childhood harm, and opportunities for self-reflection. What is meant by meaning? In this chapter, we use the word meaning to signify what has importance or value to us. The experience of meaning relates to why I want to get out of bed in the morning, why I feel desire, and why people, projects, or life matters. Meaning is often associated with the experience of interest, enthusiasm, pleasure, concentration, or energy. The experience of meaning relates to feeling engaged with life in a manner which offers a sense of value or purpose. We can also understand the experience of meaning by appreciating its opposite, an absence of meaning. There are perhaps a number of feelings associated with the absence of meaning, such as despair, despondency, anguish, or hopelessness. An absence of meaning can also be experienced as a feeling of alienation or being cut off from others' existence or even oneself. The experience of depression is certainly quite troubling for many people who experienced childhood harm, and we should not discount how disturbing depression can be. But it's possible to overlook how depression coincides with the absence of meaning. Depression is about more than problematic brain chemistry. Depression can also be seen as the psychological expression of a lack of meaning. There is another point concerning meaning which is important to mention. Western philosophy renewed its interest in meaning between and following the two world wars. This was existential philosophy, and it was mainly French and German philosophers such as Jean-Paul Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir, Albert Camus, Martin Heidegger, Hannah Arendt, and Karl Jaspers who got very interested in human meaning. They had intense and often confusing relationships with one another. Sartre slept with de Beauvoir, Heidegger slept with Arendt, and de Beauvoir asked Camus to sleep with her. He said no. Arendt and Jaspers did manage to avoid trouble and remained good friends throughout their lives. They all disagreed about many things. They were French and German, after all, but they agreed on a fascinating way of thinking about human meaning. They said that the challenge for human beings wasn't about discovering the meaning of life. They believed that there was no single or universal meaning to life. Instead, the experience of meaning or value is something every individual must create within the context of their lives. And meaning doesn't simply relate to ideas we have or a perspective we hold. We experience meaning through our actions and daily interactions. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Auschwitz survivor, put it like this: the meaning of life is to give life meaning. This is both a hopeful and challenging view, Hopeful because it suggests we have control in directing the creation of meaning. Challenging because we are also responsible for the creation of meaning. The experience of meaning can provide at least a partial remedy to suffering. The oft-quoted words of Friedrich Nietzsche captures this view in a powerful and succinct manner. Quote, "He who has a why to live for can bear almost any how." Please excuse the dated use of language in this chapter with respect to certain quotes. In other words, having something you want to live for can make suffering more tolerable. If trauma is a wound, meaning can act as a balm to soothe the pain of that wound. Can the experience of meaning be especially difficult for those who experienced childhood harm? This chapter will offer a forward-looking and encouraging opportunity for you to focus on meaning creation. However, we begin with a realistic appraisal of how meaning creation can be more challenging for people who experienced childhood abuse or neglect. If this sounds depressing, please hang in there. Some people we work with who struggle to experience meaning can blame themselves. Appreciating why meaning creation can be more difficult can provide relief from self-blame. It's not just the physical or emotional pain of childhood abuse or neglect that matters. It's how senseless or meaningless these experiences can seem. To repeat the words of Viktor Frankl, mentioned much earlier, quote, "At such a moment, it is not the physical pain which hurts the most. It is the mental agony caused by the injustice, the unreasonableness of it all." End quote. Individuals need to make sense of the harm done to them by others, but this can be agonizingly difficult. Stan experienced multiple forms of abuse, and his words illustrate an idea we have heard from many others. Quote, "Why would they do it? Why would anybody treat a child like that? They didn't want children, so why did they have me?" End quote. A question can be, how might I create a life of meaning as an adult when my childhood experiences of harm seemed so senseless? For many people who experienced childhood harm, we believe creating a meaningful life is more challenging. There are at least a couple of reasons why this can be the case, which we explore below. Appreciating the impact of childhood harm can allow some to be more self-compassionate with respect to how meaning creation may have been challenging. 1. Learning brain, survival brain, and meaning. In a sense, we have two brains. In a previous chapter, we talked about how the fight or flight pathway, sympathetic nervous system, is responsible for responding to threats through activating defenses. The shutdown pathway, or dorsal vagal system, responds to threats by collapsing. Together, we can refer to these two systems as the survival brain. The present and connected pathway, or ventral vagal system, is what we can access when we are safe, can learn, and be social. We can call this our learning brain. Many people we work with spent much of their childhood in their survival brain as they sought to stay safe or avoid harm. The functions of the survival brain grew strong with repeated use and, in adulthood, tend to get activated quickly and more frequently. As a result, many can be distracted by focusing disproportionately on survival, anxiety, and potential harm. Creating a life with meaning relies on feeling safe and social. If you are frightened, either by events in your life or by your internal emotional world, how can you focus on creating meaning? In a state of fear or anger, how can you focus on personal projects, personal learning, developing rewarding relationships, educational or occupational development, or any of the almost unlimited ways people create meaning. The purpose of the survival brain is to avoid harm right now. To create meaning, we need access to the calm, reflective, and future oriented learning brain. This can be more challenging for those who experienced childhood abuse and neglect. 2. Self agency and meaning. A sense of self agency refers to the confidence a person has that they can sort problems, engage socially, and make a contribution to society. In this respect, self agency supports the experience of meaning. Self agency develops through caring, safe, and supportive relationships the child has with carers. Parents or carers will set the child up for safe and successful experiences. We saw in a previous chapter that when a child has a secure attachment to caring adults, they will play and explore the world with a sense of curiosity. If a child feels loved and important in the eyes of caring adults, they come to see themselves as having value and being capable, which is the basis of self-agency. If a child lives with fear, they will find it difficult to approach the world with curiosity and playfulness. They spend energy searching for safety rather than exploring and learning. They are more likely to experience social and academic problems at school. Without feeling truly loved and valued at home, developing a sense of self-agency is very difficult. Feeling loved, important, and successful is the antidote to exploitation as the child grows older. Without self-agency, we know that those, especially boys, who experienced childhood trauma are more likely to act out and get drawn into groups with radicalized ideologies or gangs involved with criminal behavior. They give up that sense of agency they might have to leaders willing to tell them what to do. Lacking self-agency, young women may be more likely to act in through self-harm, eating disorders, etc. With a sense of self-agency, we are confident in solving problems, creating relationships, and being productive, all of which are the wellspring of meaning. Without the childhood experience of safety and love, self-agency, and therefore meaning, become much harder to get a hold of. Can there be meaning in suffering? It can be difficult to imagine that experiences of childhood harm have any point beyond confusion, fear, or loneliness. Suffering, at the time it is occurring, often seems to have no meaning. However, over time, some people have been able to create meaning in ways which seem related to past trauma. They may see, for example, that there are certain positive aspects of who they have become which are in some way connected to the harmful experiences they encountered. They may be creative or express themselves as a way of responding to or working with trauma. While it can be important for certain people to honor or value something which was a product of awful experiences, it's also essential to be careful with our use of language. Just because certain positives may have eventually come from past harm, this is not suggesting that the trauma was okay or justified. It in no way exonerates anyone who caused harm or gives these people power. It does not excuse or rationalize abusive behavior. It is also important to say that while we have worked with people who have eventually been able to see positive aspects of personality or self-expression which relate to past trauma, there are also people for whom this is not the case. Their experience can be that past traumatic experience was simply hurtful, compromised their development, and caused problems. If this was your experience, this needs recognizing and respecting too. However, below are examples from a small selection of people we have worked with who have been able to connect certain valued aspects of personality or self expression with past harm. Marianne was physically and emotionally abused by her parents. Quote, "If things could be different, I would never want to go through it again. I was scared a lot of the time, and there was never anyone I could talk to. But what happened has made me very aware of right and wrong. I've got this moral compass that I trust, and people will often come to me for advice because I can be really clear about the right way to handle things." End quote. Michelle had been abandoned by her mother and was abused and neglected by her stepmother. Quote, "Because of what happened to me, I know that I am very sensitive to other people's pain. I can sense it, even in people I meet for the first time. I feel a lot of empathy for anyone who has been hurt, and I end up being like a counselor to a lot of my friends and family because of that." End quote. Tom grew up in a family where violence was the norm, and he was on the receiving end of it as much as anybody. As an adult, he took up canvas painting, and he could make a connection between past trauma and creativity. Quote, "I guess my paintings are pretty dark, but it's been a way of exploring what happened to me and channeling my anger. There are people who can definitely relate to them, and maybe my paintings help others in some way. It's also the best way I know to pay the bills." End quote. Sally experienced multiple forms of abuse which occurred throughout childhood. Her experiences eventually led her to a career which is important to her. Quote, "When I was an office receptionist, staff and clients would come to me with their problems. I think that because of what happened to me, I can relate to the problems people have. One day I just thought, I'm good at this. I need to get qualified. So that's how I became a social worker." End quote. Whether people can create meaning out of past trauma varies greatly, but it does seem possible for some. Viktor Frankl even suggests that suffering may be a requirement for some forms of self-expression or creativity. Quote, "What is to give light must endure burning." End quote. Exercise 1. Think about the person you have become today. Think about what you see as strengths or positive qualities. Is there anything positive about you today related to the past harm you experienced? Are you, in some manner, a more capable or more complete person because of what you went through? Please pause the audio and complete exercise 1 in the guidebook. Reconnecting to meaning in early childhood. Most young children are wired to find almost everything about life meaningful, interesting, or stimulating. What many adults will view as mundane, children find fascinating. And most young children start out with a natural need for self-expression. Robert Fulghum tells an amusing story which vividly illustrates the above points. He had been teaching art at different schools in Tuba, Utah. Yes, that's the city's actual name. In the morning, he was working with a group of 5-year-olds and asked, "Who can draw?" Every child immediately raised their hand. Later that day, he worked with a group of teenagers at a secondary school. Again, he asked, "Who can draw?" Only one student raised their hand. Later, he reflected, how is it that all those kids forgot how to draw? So, it is probably normal for most adults to lose some of the confident self-expression of childhood. But many people who experienced childhood harm had these qualities squashed early on through abusive and neglectful experiences. So when an individual says things like, I didn't have a childhood, or my childhood got taken from me, they are referring indirectly to the loss of meaningful exploration, creative play, and self expression. However, childhood exploration and self expression are so strong that most people can recall experiences of excitement and enthusiasm they nevertheless experienced during childhood. For some, accessing what was interesting or meaningful in childhood can be a gateway to reflecting on your need for meaning today. Exercise 2. Can you recall a period in your childhood when you felt fascination, interest, or enthusiasm for something? Imagine yourself as a child involved in this thing and describe it below. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 2 in the guidebook. A tool for reflecting on meaning creation. The creation and experience throughout one's life of some sense of meaning is neither simple or easy. However, Viktor Frankl put a realistic and yet positive spin on this idea when he wrote, quote, "What man actually needs is not a tensionless state, but rather the striving and struggling for some goal worthy of him." End quote. The final section of this chapter allows you to reflect on meaning creation. We are sure that this is something you have spent time working on long before you came to this program, and we hope this does not come across as patronizing. What follows is an opportunity to build on your previous work. There is no single method for reflecting on how meaning can be experienced, but we offer a model below that suggests 3 ways to consider the experience of meaning. You may wish to keep in mind the way we described meaning previously. The experience of meaning relates to feeling engaged with life in a manner which offers a sense of value, purpose, or richness. There are at least 3 ways meaning can be experienced. 1. Through helping or caring roles. 2. Through self-expression or self-development. And 3. Through strong personal interests or aesthetic experiences. 1. Helping or caring roles. Built into most of us seems to be a need for altruism. We take pleasure in helping, caring for, or assisting others. There is no end to the ways altruism can express itself within relationships. The role of parent, friend, coach, carer, teacher, etc. Almost every work or volunteer role has an element of helping. Sarah experienced severe childhood neglect. She was a single parent, but took pride in being a good mom to her 2 children. Her role as mom gave her a clear sense of meaning. Quote, "I know I'm not a perfect mom, but I love my kids in a way that didn't happen for me. I won't let anything happen to them." End quote. But experiencing meaning through helping others doesn't need to come through what we conventionally think of as a caring role. We mentioned Mark earlier, a socially anxious young man. He was an auto mechanic who got meaning from his job in ways that went beyond simply fixing cars. He genuinely took pleasure in helping his customers. Quote, "People come into the garage and they're worried that it will cost a fortune, but I know engines and I have a reputation for keeping older cars going. I love the part where I explain what's wrong and how I'm going to repair it. You see the relief on their faces." End quote. 2. Self-expression or self-development. The experience of meaning is intimately connected to what we can do or become. The word existence comes from the Latin word existere, which means to appear, to arise, to become, or to be. But literally, it means to stand out. Existing means to stand out in some manner, to be something, to express yourself. Everyone has particular abilities or skills. There is pleasure or meaning to be found through developing and expressing such skills. Such skills do not have to be grandiose. Any skill development at any level counts. Athletics, baking, playing chess, dressmaking, etc. Meaning can be found in any form of creative expression: gardening, woodworking, painting, writing, and so on. The range of ways people work to develop or express themselves seems endless. We have worked with individuals who are keen to build dowel houses and who enjoy soap carving. One individual bred and raced ferrets. Suzanne experienced serious childhood emotional abuse and neglect, and she struggled with depression, poor self esteem, and sometimes didn't want to live. Though difficult to sometimes admit, she was good at creating handmade cards. Getting back into her craft room at home and reconnecting to the meaning she found in making cards became an important part of her recovery. A clinician named David Viscott captured the above ideas in the following words: "The purpose of life is to discover your gift. The work of life is to develop it. The meaning of life is to give your gift away." 3. Personal interests or aesthetic experiences. Meaning can also be found through anything we find interesting or within aesthetic experiences. The enjoyment of film, music, art, reading, the natural world, or any field of ideas. The pleasure of being with others. The pleasure we can take in eating, walking, or a hot bath. The fascination with simply existing, or the riddles of the universe. Exercise 3. Creating meaning as a feature of your recovery. Please pause the audio and complete exercise 3 in the guidebook. Julian's notepad. There was something a man named Julian told us during a therapy group which had quite an effect on clinicians and clients alike. The comment fits quite nicely with the topics of meaning and self-expression, and the story has a humorous twist. Julian was in his later years, had spent time in the care system, and had experienced childhood physical and emotional abuse as well as neglect. Everyone noticed that Julian always carried a small notepad and pen in his front pocket, and in one group therapy session, another client asked him what he did with the notepad. Julian said that many years ago he had developed a habit of reflecting on 2 questions every morning. 1. What is it that's important for me to do today? 2. How can I look after my well-being while I'm doing it? He would then make a list of what he wanted or needed to do that day, and a note about how he will look after his state of mind. At first glance, Julian's approach might seem rather simple, even trite. After 100 years of psychology and a few thousand years of philosophy, surely there's more to it than this, right? Well, probably. And yet, the 2 questions Julian asked himself, and the way they helped him organize his day, well, they seem to capture something quite essential. During subsequent sessions, a younger man began turning up with a notepad and pen in his shirt pocket. No one felt the need to point this out. However, As we were just about to take a break during a particular session, a woman sitting next to the young man reached down into her purse and pulled out a small notepad and said to him, "I got one too." While we are certainly not suggesting that everyone start carrying notepads around with them, we thought Julian's insight was worth sharing. Trauma, society, and you. If there is something that 140 years of psychology has taught us about trauma, it's the importance of being able to remember and talk to others about what happened. Freud got this right in the 1890s, and it's no less true today. Finding safe relationships and spaces to talk about what happened can encourage self-expression and meaning. Being unable to remember and talk about the past not only makes recovery more difficult, but acts to separate you from the rest of society. However, as Bessel van der Kolk and others have pointed out, historically, societal forces have been opposed to traumatized people remembering and speaking out. The trauma experienced by war veterans was ignored or minimized for decades. Abuse cover-ups occurring in a wide range of institutions, both religious and secular, serve as another example. Historically, policing did not always investigate when necessary. Many traumatized individuals can also feel inappropriately ashamed, which makes silence likely. Therefore, when society encourages silence, this is a double whammy. However, in the past couple of decades, we have seen changes in the status quo which are huge and positive. The development of movements such as #MeToo, #MeTooMilitary, and #ChurchToo have encouraged those who were abused in private life, the military, and within religious organizations to speak out. Numerous court proceedings and convictions against high-profile celebrities have demonstrated that justice is possible. Where abuse was institutional, organizations are being held to account. The Catholic Church, the BBC, and certain police forces serving as examples. There are many ways of breaking the silence concerning your experiences, and you should do what is comfortable with respect to your needs, relationships, and where you are in your recovery. For many individuals, it starts with letting someone they trust begin to know what happened to them and the way it's affected their life. You can go slowly if necessary, and then talk more when you get reassurance that the person is responding with support. Even people who care and want to help may need your advice on how you need them to respond. It can be helpful to let them know. Society is probably more trauma-aware today than ever before in history, although there is a long way to go. A trauma-aware society is one in which the general public understands that there are individuals they will come across who experienced trauma. It's not about walking on eggshells, but about a reasonable sensitivity within public life and the workplace. Doctors, teachers, police, dentists, salespeople, work persons coming into your home, etc., should all be aware that on any day of the week, they may be helping someone who experienced trauma. In a trauma-aware workplace, staff are provided information about the effects of trauma and how a general sensitivity, while probably a good thing for everyone, can be especially helpful for those affected by trauma. If a professional or a member of the public is not acting in a trauma-aware manner, there can be times when it makes sense to provide feedback. You are not being a trauma missionary. You are just raising awareness in a way which is necessary. Barbara experienced physical and emotional abuse throughout childhood, And her encounter with an optician is an excellent example of self-expression and how we can help society become more trauma aware. Quote, I'd never been seen by this optometrist. He was friendly, but he spoke with this loud voice and he moved quite quickly, even when he was working very close to me. I would just jump every time he spoke or moved. I said to him, I need to mention something. You seem friendly and like you know your job, but when I was younger, I had some bad experiences, and so I'm kind of sensitive when people talk in louder voices or move very quickly. He understood immediately, apologized, and changed his approach. Talking to a professional in this manner might seem unthinkable, but you are entitled to do it if needed. If a professional takes offense or acts defensively, you probably need to see someone else. The idea of making allegations against a perpetrator of historical trauma can be the most challenging and complex question for some. Whether an individual comes forward with allegations to the authorities is a very personal decision. Sometimes it's not possible, such as in cases where the perpetrator is deceased. Sometimes an individual simply does not see this as a necessary part of their recovery work. However, we have worked with many individuals who brought allegations forward. Some have found this process to be an important and therapeutic part of their recovery, while others have found it to be a disappointing experience. It's such a personal decision and depends on so many factors, it's impossible for us to suggest a specific direction. If you are considering making allegations, we recommend getting professional advice. A consultation with a reputable lawyer who is experienced in this area is an option, and in some cases, there is no fee for an initial consultation. Or, if you wish, you should be able to speak to the police initially without providing the name of the perpetrator. This may help you better understand the likely local processes of investigation. If you need to speak with an officer of a particular gender, you are entitled to ask for that. Whether beginning to tell the story with someone you trust, helping society to be that bit more trauma-informed, or considering bringing allegations forward, all of this can potentially support self-expression and the sense of meaning which is so important to recovery. This is the end of the audio for the chapter on meaning and self-expression.